This poem is Stealing by Carol Ann Duffy, and a little background was that the poem was written in regards to Margaret Thatcher, who had been Prime Minister of Britain, and during her prime ministership, I guess, during the 1980s, because of her government's policies, there was a lot of social unrest, such as poll tax riots, the miners' strike, race riots in cities, and there was a lot of homelessness, and unemployment was very common at the time, which led to a lot of stealing. Duffy was under the impression that basically the rich were getting richer and the poor were getting poorer, and this connects to the theme of the poem, which deals with feelings of isolation and failure and juvenile delinquency and class resentment. Carol Ann Duffy wrote Stealing using 6 cinquains, which are 5-line stanzas, and throughout the poem there's really no regularity in the lines. Like, for instance, there's not a rhyme scheme seen throughout, in some of her other poems, and really with going on with the irregularity of the lines, in the third stanza is basically just a tangent that doesn't. It just kind of is in the middle between because the second stanza and the fourth stanza deal with the snowman and stealing the snowman, which I'll talk about in a minute. But so the speaker just kind of goes around and is just trying to convey what they're going through, but it's not. The thing is, it's not really relating back, which connects back to the theme of of isolation and alienation, because the person can't really convey what they want, and they are not really speaking clearly. The speaker of the poem is most likely a juvenile, due to some of the language throughout, where the stealing and joyriding and just breaking into houses. There is no specific gender to the speaker, which kind of makes sense because Duffy wants the poem to relate to really anyone, although it sounds like it probably would be a male, just because some of the things that the speaker does, the joyriding and the stealing and some of the more violent language, kind of is traditionally attributed to males, more masculine, but it really could relate to anyone. Stealing opens up with what's called a hypophora, which is a form of rhetorical question where the speaker will ask a question and then they immediately answer it themselves, and it creates a dialogue between the speaker and the reader, although it's one-sided because the speaker is just talking, so it's it's a monologue. But so we take from the start that Duffy is creating an isolated speaker who's trying to reach out with no response from the outside, and in the whole for the first stanza, he's describing, or he or she is describing stealing the snowman. And what I thought was interesting was he says, I wanted him a mate, so he wants him as a friend, which shows that he's longing for friendship, but also it begs the question, why does he want a friend who can't talk? So I don't know if he's just he wants a connection just to anything. And he also Duffy uses simile when she says, with a mind as cold as the slice of ice within my own brain. So it's showing the coldness of the speaker, and so it's showing that the speaker is not really a warm-hearted person. So it shows the coldness of the speaker. And also it shows that the snowman is acting as a parallel between the speaker, because the snowman is cold and mute, which probably relates back to the speaker, because throughout the whole poem, the speaker is really going off on their own with stealing, and they have their own issues, so they probably aren't really fitting into society well, so they may not talk much, which relates back to the snowman, who obviously doesn't speak because it's inanimate. And in addition, where it says as cold as the slice of ice within my own brain, that kind of adds to the violent diction and language seen throughout the poem. Now going on to the second stanza, and then it says I started with the head, so then that connect. That's where he begins describing like physically stealing the snowman. Now going on to stanza 2, where he says, "Better off dead than giving in, not taking what you want." That's like, that shows he has like a never say die, or like a not giving up attitude, which may only come, which like a rich person who may have been pampered their whole life might not have that attitude. But if you're poor or something, and your whole life you've been having to like really like work hard to get what you want, or like bend the rules or something to get what you want, then that might relate to that attitude he has. And where he says, like, he weighed a ton, his torso frozen stiff. Well, there he goes describing, like, actually stealing the snowman. And he says, "Hugged to my chest, a fierce chill piercing my gut." That could represent, like, the closeness and affection that he's longing, and he's having to, or he or she is having to get that affection from a snowman, which, you know, which really shows maybe how low the speaker is at this time, where they're getting, you know, some sort of like thrill or happiness from a connection with a snowman. Sorry, my throat hurts. Now, furthermore, where it says part of the thrill was knowing that children would cry in the morning, that's kind of like sadistic, I would say, because like, who enjoys watching children cry? And then he says life's tough. So maybe he's trying to like teach them like a lesson, because maybe he's had to go through a bunch. You know, this is around that time period of social unrest. So again, that deals with the theme of isolation. Because first of all, you might be, that sounds like something an isolated person who may not like society would say, like, I want to see kids cry. So life's tough. Maybe he's trying to impose like his life views. He or she's life views onto the reader. So then going on to the third stanza, this is sort of like just like a tangent, where whereas the second stanza is talking about stealing the snowman, and then that's gonna come back in the fourth stanza. So the third, he's just like he or she is like describing their life, where it says, "Sometimes I steal things I don't need. I joyride cars to nowhere. I break into houses just to have a look." And maybe where it says like, "I break into houses just to have a look," it's kind of saying that like he steals just to be noticed, or maybe just acknowledged, which shows where Duffy uses a metaphor when she says, I'm a mucky ghost. I leave a mess," which is saying that he's invisible save for the mess that he leaves, like the break-ins and all the like, maybe, and all of like the destruction and the joyriding, like that's all the mess that he leaves, but he's invisible aside from that. And where he says, or he or she says, "A stranger's bedroom mirrors, I sigh like this, I think, I mean, it's also like, it's providing more dialogue between the speaker and the reader, where he's like telling you like, here's how I sigh, basically. But I also thought maybe where he says like mirrors, like seeing himself in the mirrors is maybe why he sighed, like he doesn't like he or she doesn't like who they are, or they're like depressed at the time. So that would maybe go along with that. And also, this whole stanza reinforces the theme of meaningless and feelings of isolation. Like he's stealing all these things just because there's not really any meaning in the things that he's doing. Like he's joyriding a car to nowhere. He says he breaks into houses just to have a look. Like maybe he only steals random things, or he doesn't even steal anything. Just the idea of breaking in. So that's it's also kind of sad. So then you feel maybe a little more sympathy to the reader that he's doing all this for just to be maybe acknowledged, or to get some thrill in his life. Now in the fourth stanza, it's kind of like resuming back where we left off at stanza 2. And he's further describing stealing the snowman. He says it took some time. He reassembled it in the yard. He didn't look the same. And he says, I took a run and booted him again and again. So he's kicking and destroying the snowman, which is also, it's violent and self-destructive in a way, because if the snowman is parallel to him and he's beating up the snowman, then it's maybe it's showing that the person, the speaker, maybe hates who they are, and they're kind of they're taking out the anger on themselves, or just the world, or how they fit in the world on the snowman. And how also how it says like again and again, the repetition is showing he's just like, or he or she is just like repeatedly beating up the snowman. And then it says, my breath ripped out in rags, and that's also more violent and self-destructive language that's kind of seen throughout the whole poem. And then it says, then I was standing alone among lumps of snow, sick of the world. And that is also adding more sympathy to the reader. Because, I mean, I think everybody can kind of, like, relate to feeling alone. And also in this situation, in a time where a lot of people were very poor and struggling, you know, the speaker is just, like, sitting there just feeling just, like, depressed, really. And also, with this kind of choppy language, where, like, and it's kind of in the past, the Duffy had the speaker speak with little, like, kind of, like, blunt, short, like one-syllable sentences, like, up here it says, like, snowman, or midnight, and really in stanza 4, there's a lot of that, and it's kind of adding to, like, the harshness or maybe toughness of the speaker, and, like, they're not really speaking poetically, and not really eloquently either, which relates to the speaker, because the speaker doesn't seem like someone who's very eloquent themselves. Now, in the final stanza, again, with the little blunt sentences, it says, boredom. Mostly I'm so bored I could eat myself. Again, violent and self-destructive language. Not something really anyone would say who really likes themselves, maybe. And it says, one time I stole a guitar and thought I might learn to play. That's, again, adding to the theme of failure. Like, he or she never learned to play. And it says, I nicked a bust of Shakespeare once, flogged it, but the snowman was a straight... Well, that's not really what I'm talking about. But it says, I nicked a bust of Shakespeare once and flogged it. I thought maybe kind of longing for an education with this thing of guitar. Maybe he wants to be connected to music or something. And Shakespeare, maybe he wanted to somehow connect with the education aspect, of like literature. But again, doesn't work out. So failure, isolation, and then in the end, he says, you don't understand a word I'm saying, do you? And I took that where he says, it shows how the speaker is misunderstood, a lack of connection, and it adds, again, to the theme of loneliness, because he can't convey the thoughts and feelings that he or she wants to convey. They're like, throughout the whole thing, after reading it, when you read it the first time, you're kind of confused, because it's really, again, not really regular lines, everything's kind of choppy, but, so maybe that's kind of how the reader is, which kind of relates back to the people at the time. Maybe they couldn't really get out what they wanted to say, or they were just stuck. And so that's kind of how you, that's what I kind of took from the reader, and then from reading the poem. And the tone throughout is it's kind of dark. It's plain ordinary, not very flowery language, which suits the speaker. And then it ends back in a rhetorical question. It started with a rhetorical question. It ends in a rhetorical question. He's just questioning everything. He's questioning him. He's questioning. I don't even know if he's questioning. He's just basically saying that everything he's saying, you're not understanding, and it's just kind of a cycle again. So that's, basically the poem. Okay.